Greetings and welcome to the Daniel's Podcast Show. I am Daniel and I just wanted to tap in with my listening audience and those abroad. I was looking in my library and it dawned on me that, out of a lot of videos and topics I addressed last year in 2023, one topic I really didn't speak about at all how deals with criminal law. So I got here a book, from Nolan Press I purchased years ago, and it's entitled Criminal Law Handbook: Know Your Rights, Survive the System. And the reason why I thought about, giving a little input on my experience dealing with criminal law, police officers, and just growing up in the black neighborhood, I pretty much can say that I went through a lot of unfortunate uh, situations that could have been prevented only if I had some type of knowledge on how the system works. You know, we we witness all the time people being stopped by law enforcement, people getting in these back and forth conversations, altercations, and even including, of course, police brutality happens because oftentimes just the most basic understanding of the law, none of us have been taught. And to just be quite frankly, growing up in the hood, we unfamiliar with pretty much everything dealing with your legal rights and how to protect yourself before you have to protect yourself physically. We need to know how to protect ourselves legally. So, I thought about, well, Daniel, you got to do more because I am like many of you young black men growing up in America. Uh, I went to jail as a juvenile. I went to jail as a young adult. I got involved early, learning the hard way on how the system works. Again, I never, my experiences when I was a teenager and I got in trouble as a teenager, I didn't have an attorney. You know, in them days, you go to juvenile hall. I'm talking about the 1980s, the early 1980s, late 1970s, early 80s. If you go to juvenile, you pretty much was giving a public defender similar to like an adult, but basically it really depend on the case. So we was at the mercy of the courts, and the rest is history. Many of us was put on or placed on probation, court probation, sometime 6 months to a year. We had to check in with our what they call probation officer, PO, and even in that process, we pretty much didn't. We didn't know anything about the law, notwithstanding how to uh, get justice within a system by design works perfectly when the average or the common person unfortunately knows nothing about the law. So I just want to say, or I just wanted to take this little time out to kind of like just reference to a few points in this particular book. What caught my eye was chapter 3, because chapter 3 speaks about arrest, when it happened, what it means. And a lot of us, as you know, when we are out there just in the world, if you are stopped by a police officer, you must know your rights. Just basic rights can not only save your life, But just knowing basic rights can also uh, avoid you going through the legal system that really is unfavorable to yourself, or as we say, you know, you uh, help yourself into the system by speaking in a way that whatever you say can be used against you. What I thought was interesting to me when I looked in the chapter 3 is all these different sections and principles that applies to being arrested, being detained. For example, memorandum rights. What is memorandum rights? When a person is under arrest and, you know, the first question is asked, this is you asking the police officer, what am I being arrested for? What am I being stopped for? Which is usually a common reaction. Can I be charged with a crime without being arrested? Does the Constitution limits the power of the police to make arrests? What exactly does probable cause mean? What happens if a police arrests me and turns out that they lacked probable cause? Arrest warrants. Police officers who arrest me didn't have arrest warrant. What is the outcome and what can I do about that? Um, then it goes into section 3, warrantless search and seizures or warrantless arrests. Can a police officer legally make a warrantless arrest? Can a police officer make a warrantless entry into my home to arrest me? I won't go into section 4 because that deals with use of force when making arrests, and we don't want it to come to use of force. So, as a 55-year-old person now, I think I'm better equipped to deal with law enforcement. Unfortunately, as a youth and a young adult, I come from a time when many of us would fight the police. We would get in altercations with the police, in particular the narcs or the narcotic division, because we who unfortunately experience growing up in the black communities here in America know what it means to go through being racially profiled, or uh, police officers planting something on you, whether it's drugs, guns, you name it. So at a certain point, when I was growing up, we reacted to that, and it really wasn't a nice reaction. We felt that it was war declared on us, even though we didn't know the the particulars of that. We actually really believed that in our heart, and this is why even some of the OG police officers will tell the young officers today, you don't know what it really means to be a police officer because you haven't went through what they used to go through. But I think it's our duty, those like myself who've been through these experiences, to share with anyone else out there who might uh, need just a little guidance on how to deal with a situation when you encounter being stopped by police officers. Number one, we have to learn how to, when a police officer stop us, we have to learn how to not uh, return with a knee-jerk reaction. Emotions and anger and all them type of things clouds your thinking. You probably have heard this before, but I'm gonna reiterate this for those who might haven't heard that. Emotions, again, and anger will cloud the way you think, and you will respond in a way that you might overreact. I was walking down the street one time near Virgo areas of the Fillmore area, and one of my friends was being stopped by the police. Well, he was being jacked up by the police officer in near a gas station. And I had to stop and see what was going on. This was my friend, so I stopped. I had a backpack on. I was actually just getting off work, and the police officer zeroed in on me because I was just standing there and just like, okay, what's going on? What did he do? I was asking questions, and they was more upset and concerned that I had the nerve to stand there and watch them while they claimed to be investigating my friend for something he had did, which I didn't know, the situation at all. But anyway, this was like in the 1990s. So I had learned from the 80s that whatever I was doing, back in them days, look, I got to start doing or responding better to law enforcement. So I had gained the knowledge of us as citizens. We have rights. One of them being they call onlookers rights or unlook rights. ONLOOK. As an onlooker, you have rights that's written into our California Constitution as well as the United States Constitution, and probably somewhere even in our police codes here in San Francisco, that if you see law enforcement interacting with a citizen, you can look, you can unlook, and you can investigate by asking questions. Now, you can't interfere. This is how a lot of times they get many of us, because we might come within a certain amount of feet between yourself and the situation or the so-called incident that's being investigated. So we have to understand that part. That's another part that we have to understand. And you can ask an officer, excuse me, officer, I don't want to interfere, but I will like to ask a question either to the officer or to the quote unquote so-called suspect. And books like these, these books like these is something that will help us understand again the fundamentals of how to engage with law enforcement in a way that we can become advocates for ourselves and advocates for our friends and our family in a time of crisis, when it appears that a stop is leads to something else bigger or is get blown out of proportion. And we all know this is why we done had Rodney King, George Floyd, and the list goes on and on. So let me just get straight into it. I think we have to know, number one, that you have a right to be an onlooker. You have a right to ask questions to the officer, and you have a right to ask again the so-called suspect, or let me say alleged, before I get beat up, because I know it's going to be many. What do you mean so-called? I'm not trying to undermine law enforcement. However, I got to keep it real. There's a lot of officers who come to work and just want to do their job. We know that, yes. But also, like with any other profession, whether it's Safeway, wink, wink, nod, nod, whether it's city government, you always have a rogue element when you got people together. And definitely when you got people with authority and power. One of the things we used to say back in the early 2000s when we was trying to implement community policing here in San Francisco is that the police officers carry life and death at the hip. So I want to hear that, for the naysayers and those who's always said, but man, their job, yes, they have a job to do. But last time I checked, being a police officer, a firefighter, these are not jobs that you are forced to take. We all make a decision And we definitely make a critical decision when we consider to join law enforcement, because you know as well as I know, yeah, you might say to yourself, I'm coming home or I'm going home tonight, but then that means somebody else might have to die. If it's a situation where it's your life or their life. So I just want to make it very clear, though, we must get basic knowledge to learn how to engage with law enforcement. And just like we ask them to not stereotype us, we shouldn't stereotype them either. However, knowledge on both sides, whether it's the people or the police, will help increase a better interaction and respect between us and them and us, and the community will have a better understanding why when an officer say you're interfering, why he's saying you're interfering. He or she has the mindset of, okay, anytime that I engage with somebody and there's a potential risk, I must control the situation. This is what officers are being trained, taught in their academies, is to control the situation. There was a time when here in the city of San Francisco, that police would just jump out their car and just start screaming and yelling at everybody at the scene or at the the incident in progress. Get back, get back, get back. And we continue to try to get the police department as well as our city officials to realize that there got to be a such thing as what they're taught also, time and distance. Meaning what? Meaning that a lot of times if people are angry and emotional about a situation, definitely if it's a family member, then you would think time and distance need to kick in, because us as human beings, if you give us a little time, hopefully we will calm down. So we have to learn again the fundamentals of our rights. We know that there's constitutional rights, Bill of Rights, that's in play or at play. But a lot of us really, I don't think, understand how, for example, if an officer asks you, can he or she see your identification card, right? Now, before you can choose to say, yeah, sure. Or, based on our Constitution, you have rights that protects you to say anything to this officer until that officer explain, or you either being arrested. I'm not saying detained. Detained and arrest is two different things. I'm gonna get on that just a second. Because when you're detained, let me just say this clearly: when you're detained and you're not being arrested, then you can walk away. If and the detainment itself cannot, officers have time limits. The moment the clock is ticking, the moment that an officer stop you, the clock is ticking. Just like we say, you have to be charged. I know a lot of y'all remember this within 72 hours. Well, you definitely, a police officer can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to detain you for 10 hours. For 10 hours? No. A lot of discretion is given to police officers. And some of the frustration that people always communicate to the city's officials and to the oversight bodies of these police departments is that if a police officer is given all this discretion and the training is not necessarily sympathetic to the people they serve, and you have a potential explosion there. So again, we have to get the knowledge about being detained versus being arrested. Because if you say to a police officer, why? you stopping me, or why are you detaining me? They have to answer that, right? If they have been given a description, and let me back up and do a disclaimer. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not sitting up here trying to give you legal what is that? I'm not consulting to you as a legal representation, because you will not have this video in court with yourself before you go to your arraignment and say, or even, you know, unfortunately, if you go further than that and say, well, it's Daniel, it's the Daniel podcast show that got me uh, 5 or 10 years. No, I'm gonna do a disclaimer now for you and for all of those who's watching. I'm just giving you some of my experiences I've went through personally in concert with this book. Even Nolan Press, somewhere in this book, will tell you that you still need to consult and get legal advice. So I'll tell you the same thing. Don't, please. It's not me that's giving you any information here that I would say is absolute. However, it's still good information because it's working for me, and I have a perspective, and I have a duty again and a right to communicate with you what I believe can help, you know, make these situations a little better. And again, I didn't have pretty much no episodes last year, podcast episodes dealing with criminal law and how that applies to us as individuals, which I think I need to. I'm working on chapters in my bio, my book, which is an autobiography, of course, about my own personal life, and examining, or opening up my book to uh, everyone publicly about some of the things that I went through. But I wanted to just start addressing more criminal things that's happening to young black, brown, and even white men in this country, throughout this world. And we have to become more knowledgeable and use better tactics on how we engage. And again, this is not only by you educating yourself, this would help you, it would help your friends and families, because somebody in the bunch got it's got to know how to handle the situation. So again, let's just get back to the arrest. So now you have a thing called the memorandum rights. Your memorandum rights is a police officer actually reading you your memorandum rights and letting you know the rights that you have as a person. And it's good even if an officer haven't read you your memorandum rights. Of course, cases have been kicked out because memorandum rights is the officer actually uh, somewhat, I won't say reminding you, but it's an officer giving you the opportunity to know before they engage. So it actually protects them too. Uh, I thought I had to put something to the side about specifically dealing with Miranda rights, but I don't see it here. But let me just go back to being stopped and engaged. So what I would just say is, again, let's y'all, let's really try to get a better understanding about when a police officer stop you and they're investigating something that happened. You don't have to blow that out of proportion. I know a lot of times it's frustrating as young black men in particular, being profiled, being harassed, being disrespected. It's embarrassing. Definitely when our children or our elders or our wives, family is around. However, as black men, we need to know that we are unfortunately targets in this country of and what we don't want is for to the situations to blow out of proportion. So we have to know how to engage. Now, for you and I, we have a responsibility again to ask questions. And if a police officer is saying you are being arrested, you don't have to say absolutely nothing. That's when your rights kick into another level. Because after a police officer arrests you, anything you say can and will be used against you. So at that moment, you can invoke the what is it? The Fifth Amendment. I want to be sure here. Well, yeah, because the Fourth Amendment is talking about search and seizure. So you can invoke your amendment, your I can't even say the word. You can invoke your rights to not say anything. And from that point on, if you're taking into a holding tank or if you're arrested and taken and booked into some jail facility, then that's when the clock is ticking. And obviously, the police officer must refer the case over, the information over to a district attorney, and the district attorney will either file, press the charges, or they have 72 hours to let you go. That's how it's supposed to work. I know many a times people are like, it never turns out that way. But even if you are charged within the 72 hours, they must arraign you in court. Um, and a judge will set a bail most of the time. And here in the state of California, we've been going through a lot of, I guess you can say, back and forth on, you know, setting bail. And even in that, there's problems because, you know, 9 times out of 10, people who live below a certain income bracket, of course, black and brown, we are unfairly treated, not only when it comes to them setting high bails, but then, you know, it just goes on and on when you have uh, racism that's institutionalized, when you have all these different structures, internal structures to keep certain people in the system and becoming victims of the system, but then while many others walk and are able to get justice. So let's get back again to the beginning. So I just wanted to share some of my thoughts about being stopped by the police. Now, of course, I'm not going to just leave it here. I will be preparing a long podcast show, and I want to invite people um, to speak about your situation personally. Definitely, you know, if you have had issues with law enforcement and you've been stopped, and the one big one now is that us being stopped while we go into supermarkets because of some of the, you know, not some, but a lot of the theft that's happening. Which I tell people, of course, yeah, people been stealing out of supermarkets. People been stealing, you know, and that doesn't give security guards, which is a whole nother conversation, a right to harass you or racially profile you, notwithstanding police officers to harass you and racial profile you. So, okay, I just wanted to just tap in with you. It's been 30 minutes. This is just a 30-minute preview to the upcoming show. But again, if you get a chance, you can order the Nolan Press Criminal Law Handbook, Know Your Rights, Survive the System. Usually, I purchased this one off Amazon. Excellent place to get books for reasonable prices. Sometime even like this one, I believe, was a used book, so I think I only paid like, wow, it had to be like $4. Come on, $4. That's nothing. That's that's just some coffee. That's a medium cup of coffee. And even at Starbucks, it might be a little higher. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's worth your investment. Thank you. Peace out.